This is good stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
So Sheila, maybe you can talk about your background too.
So, so I started off in the late 90s. I'm losing track of the decades. And it was really interaction design. And at that point, I was working for VanCity in, designing financial experiences. So I really started off right away in product design as well. I really didn't have much experience on on marketing websites. It's really been product my whole life in this field. And so I moved over to HSBC after about a decade. And that's really where I was surrounded by a lot of researchers, a huge team, like 100 people across the globe, and a lot of researchers. It was split like half and half design research. So at that point, I kind of made an intentional switch from design into research because I was able to mentor with the research team. Really fabulous team. A lot of them are still around Vancouver, might be on the call here too. And so then from there, went to Nokia, which was really a very research oriented organization as well, and was able to flex that muscle. But at Spatial, we have really grown that research practice. We do UX design as well, and it's always based on great research. But research has been a kind of pillar of the business from day one.
Right. So when you say product, do you mean physical product or like just digital product? Digital product, okay? Because sometimes it can mean both ways, right?
Yeah, it's a super confusing word. We completely agree.
So I'd love to ask the question about like why I know you guys with other volunteers in the community started the Radical Research Summit, right? Which started in 2016, I suppose. So what happened? Like why did it start? Like, is it the market changed here? Because I used to feel like Vancouver was like a retiree city, in the past. But I think recently it seems to be booming. A lot of tech startups, a lot of tech companies from the US coming over here. Like, what's happening? Can you brief us about that?
So is the question about what's happening in the market, or is the question about Radical?
Oh, both. Yeah. Is it something that happened in the market that made you start the conference?
Okay. Well, yeah. I'll start this and then Sheila can chime in a little bit. But in 2016, we had the first Radical Research conference, and it really started out, I think that there was a few of us having some coffee conversations and things like that. And it was probably after the UX Awards in 2015. And we were kind of saying how, everybody's talking about UX design, but nobody's really talking about research, which is weird because research is essential to good design. So we were kind of lamenting how we should have some kind of an event that really focuses on research. And so we had some conversations with some of our research peers in the industry, Tara Franz, who was working at Facebook, Rachel Singh at Microsoft, and Rock Leung and Stefan Dubrava from Samsung. We all felt that, there was an opportunity to talk more, get together and share about research. So we thought, well, maybe we can start a meetup. And then kind of coincidentally around that time, one of our clients was the H.R. Macmillan Space Center, or the planetarium in Vancouver, as some of you may know. And they're a nonprofit. We were doing some design work for them. And they said, hey, if you want to use our venue, we've got an auditorium and, you can use it for free. And we thought, well, heck, why don't we have a research-oriented event at the planetarium? And so that's kind of how it started. And our goals for the event at the outset, and actually still continue, were to raise the profile of research and its value to UX and to product, to share tools and techniques, and also to create a community of researchers in Vancouver, Seattle, and in the Bay Area. So from the start, radical research was a labor of love organized by researchers and other UXers who are passionate about research. And so, yeah, we didn't actually run it last year because of COVID, but we've gone ahead this year and we're doing Radical in a virtual format that runs over a few days. And we've had, you know, all the way along, every year we've run it, we've had great support from the community, from sponsors. We've pretty much had a sold out event every year that we've had it. So really it's been a great opportunity to connect with people. And Sheila, do you want to add to that? Maybe talk a bit about what this year's about? She's on mute.
Oh, we need to hear your voice. Okay.
The dog began barking. I had to put myself on mute. But yeah, so we are like counting down the days actually to Radical Research. It's running the 27th, 8th, 9th, and 30th of the month. We're running it over 4 days virtually this year. We wanted to break it up so it wasn't like a full day online conference, which we're all finding a bit overwhelming these days. But really this year, we, you know, when we sat down and thought about the themes that we wanted to explore, we really wanted to, you know, think about what would be inspiring us at this moment in time with all this radical change that we're moving through and living through. And, you know, both the positives and the negatives of this time that we're going through. So we've just got some excellent talks that we're really looking forward to. There's a talk on designing for gender equity. There's foundational research, you know, about the barriers to gender equity from a team at Google. There's a fantastic talk about finding our courage and hitting reset during this time from Sarah Wachter-Bacher, who's a really well-known person in our space. And there's going to be a talk about designing inclusive participant experiences. You know, so how we as researchers need to be responsible for the care of our participants to build, you know, more caring environments for our participants, which I'm super excited to learn more from. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting, diverse, kind of, you know, deep level talks that we're looking forward to this year.
Great. So I'm just curious, when you guys started this in 2016, was the market demanding this? Like were clients asking for research, or you guys just started it and see how it goes? Like how has the Canadian design research market changed over the years?
Well, I would say that in 2016, this was one of the only research focused events that we knew of. I wouldn't say it was driven from, let's say, market demand, as in it was more, I think, because as user researchers and within our peer group, with the researchers we had, we felt we could learn from each other. So that was probably more of the motivation than, say, a market demand.
Yeah.
But I would say that over the last, I don't know, say 8 to 10 years, you know, UX has gone, your UX research has gone from kind of a specialty role that was mainly seen in large tech companies to becoming much more mainstream. And so these days, most, you know, actually, let me just start by saying about 10 years ago, UX design was a specialist role. And probably now what we're seeing is that research is kind of mirroring that in terms of its growth and its popularity. That, you know, right now I would say that it's probably UX research is quite common in large tech companies, but it's not necessarily a full-time role within smaller organizations or product teams. And, you know, maybe in those companies, there's one researcher supporting multiple product teams, but we're definitely seeing the growth in and demand for research increasing. And I'm just going to hand over to Sheila because she can probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so like in the mature tech organizations, UX research is becoming very influential voice in the organization. So it's what we're seeing, as a vendor being brought in. It's often part of the strategic product direction. So we'll be supporting that, those initiatives and those tracks in their product life cycles. So it's gone like way past any sort of tactical work. Like this is really built in, but this is like super, these are the big tech companies who have like giant teams of product and UX and they have really sort of tapped into the value of UX research. So there's like a whole, there's a variety of different types of research that we would do for those types of organizations, like competitive benchmarks, KPIs, customer experience research, all types of foundational research. It has dramatically expanded over the last 5 years, I would say. And now that you're seeing those those big tech organizations are setting up in Vancouver, Amazon hiring like mad, UX research, right. Microsoft, right. Those roles are part of the larger organization. So you can see that it will be, they will be operating in that manner.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of job descriptions in user research recently, like on LinkedIn, that comes to my inbox every day, from Amazon, Google, like Microsoft, and it's interesting because some of a lot of companies are hiring senior people. And then the definition of senior is like 6 years or 3 to 6 years experience. So I wanted to, ask maybe Sheila, like, what do you think it takes to become a user researcher? Like what qualifications? Because we know as IxDA that there are many people changing industries and they're coming in as career changers. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, there's like the foundational understanding of the research methodologies. That's kind of like table stakes. I mean, having an innate curiosity is an important trait, I would say. Being able to explore questions and, confront different types of problems, explore, being comfortable in these unknown spaces and, formulating plans to explore them. That's all sort of part of the skill set. There's a whole bunch of different methods. There's qualitative methods and quantitative methods, different approaches where you can combine them. The basic sort of usability study is really where one starts, and there are foundational skills that you learn doing that, like, just formulating a plan, a test plan, and formulating an approach and writing a discussion guide and making sure you understand the client's problems and is the discussion guide really getting at it and understanding it. So, there's a way to sort of scaffold up from very basic usability studies to doing the more complex research. I would say that that's where you kind of get your foot in the door and you start. But yeah, you need to be really sort of comfortable exploring new technology and just like getting into these new domains, getting up to speed really quickly. Like every new study, we're like thrown some new, could just, you just never know what you're going to get. So you just constantly learning a new thing.
So as a, let's say a junior person who's coming into the field or a career changer, where do they learn this stuff?
Well, I mean, I would say that any decent UX program is going to have some research component, but it's probably small compared to the UX design component, which I guess Elynn and I have had a conversation about this, and we're feeling like the programs need to change and adapt a little bit. That maybe more research methods should be part of the programming. Certainly the programs in Vancouver that we're hiring out of, the students have good basic research skills.
Where do you hire out of? if you don't
We've
mind
hi-
sharing.
Yeah. We've hired out of Emily Carr, UBC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So how much time does it actually take to become a user research professional, you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's really going to depend on where you're at.
Mm.
I would also say it depends on what your background is.
Yeah.
Because what we've found with research and with researchers is that they come from a diversity of backgrounds. It's quite phenomenal, from social sciences to engineering, and
Fine arts.
and English majors and things like that. So we do see that. I think some of those traits that Sheila talked a bit about. I mean, there's some curiosity, there's exceptional listening skills, good communication skills, but it's really also, you kind of have to like working with people, and basically your job is to try to make people comfortable so that you can build a rapport with them and really get them to share their views and perspectives honestly. So what does it take to become it? It often depends on the background. So for example, we hired someone recently as a junior who had no research background and no UX background. And so we took a little bit of a chance, but she had done a little bit of research. She's a master's in Asian studies. So she actually has a strong academic background in the social sciences, and really had a lot of the attributes of a good researcher. And we thought, well, why don't we give her an opportunity to sort of take her very small amount of research skills and try to build on that. So she started as a research support person with us, and she's actually been a really quick study. So.
Awesome. So I know that actually the Canadian market is maybe 90% SME companies, small medium enterprises, right? So like especially like startups, and then they have to work agile. A typical question from the tech startups is like, we don't have time. How do you, as a single researcher, sometimes in these organizations, like convince, the CEO or the colleagues like that research isn't needed?
Well, I'm going to share a little story about the power of research. And when I worked at Travelocity in Asia, I was based in Singapore, and I was a product manager. And I suggested doing some user testing to my boss, who was the CEO. And he was really like very lukewarm on it, didn't really understand it, didn't really, I guess he didn't understand it, therefore he was skeptical and didn't really see the value. I tried to explain to him that, why this was important. He indulged me, and but the reason why I wanted to do some research is because our data showed a significant drop off at certain point along our checkout path. So we really wanted to dig in and find out what was it that was stopping people and what was causing this drop off. So the data could tell us that there were some things going on, but we didn't really know why. Wow. So that's where the research piece came in, and we were able to easily identify why. And it was this crazy thing where we had, when someone entered their address, the postcode was mandatory, but it was in a US format. And when we went to translate that to the Australian market, nobody changed that format. And so the transaction was actually failing. And as we watched people complete the transaction, it was like, aha, this is so obvious and so crazy that we missed this in development. But it really allowed us to then just go in and immediately turn off that as a mandatory field. And it allowed us to increase our conversion significantly, which of course meant dollars in the door. So my boss all of a sudden started to say to me, well, anytime you want to do some more research, you can do that.
So at the offset, how did you convince him, like without having done?
Well, I just said that it wasn't going to cost much, and that I would handle it all, and he would, it wouldn't stop anyone else's productivity on other things. So that was it. But But in terms of this question of I don't have time, we don't have time for research, I kind of roll my eyes because, if especially in an agile environment, customer engagement is a key principle of agile. And so it shouldn't be skipped, but we often see that it is skipped. And it's kind of, a lot of agile teams sort of call themselves agile-esque because they sort of tailor or they pick and choose what they think works for them, but they often skip research. So, where companies don't have time for research, I think often it's just that they don't value it or that they just aren't aware of the value it can bring. In startups, it might be because they don't have the budget, in which case our answer to that would really be to say, well, there are some inexpensive ways to do some research that at least is the starting point until they maybe realize some value. But, the reality is it's a super crowded marketplace these days, and research reduces the potential for failure of your product. So it can help ensure your MVP is compelling. It helps you to determine which features should be prioritized. And obviously on the usability front, it ensures that people can successfully interact with your product. So that's kind of my
what I'm hearing is to do the business speak, right? To decision makers, instead of like sometimes maybe just the word research freaks them out because they think it's going to take a few years, right? Yeah. And
oh yeah, totally. I would just add that, I mean, we bump up against the skeptics who, don't see the value or, think it's too expensive or it's going to take too long or, or they're quant people and they don't get qual. They're like, but it's not significant because there aren't enough people. So you do learn the skill of kind of managing those types of stakeholders over the years. It's a skill that you develop. They're out there on every project, I can say.
Yeah.
And, Vancouver is what I'll call a very engineering oriented culture in the tech space. And again, they often just have never been exposed to the value of research. What we do try to share is that, all of the big tech companies have a significant investment in research for a good reason.
Yeah.
Because it helps them make good product decisions. It's less risky. We do try to talk to our product people and business people in language that they understand, to your point, Elaine, about, reducing risk.
Yeah.
Why spend a huge amount of development time? That's very risky without knowing for sure that what you're developing is the right thing. So we talk about that research can reduce risk, can help you build a better product.
Right. So maybe for the audience, especially some of the newcomers, like, can you explain, maybe Sheila can answer this question, like, how is user research different from usability and like user testing?
Well, I mean, user testing and usability are a subset of user research. User research is a broad umbrella that, there's a lot of different techniques and methods under it. Usability and is a evaluative method. We use it when we're wanting to see how a design performs. It can be a prototype or it can be something that's existing already out there that needs to be, reviewed. User research encompasses, audience research and other, research pieces. So yeah, it's a broad.
The like exploratory research, like which happens more in the beginning, maybe even before a product even exists, right? How like in Canada, do you feel it's more the latter or it's more the exploratory type of work?
We just had a long conversation about this. Our work is really shifting more towards the upfront strategic research. We still do plenty of evaluative research as well, but I think companies are cottoning on to the value of doing the research up front rather than at the back end.
That's good news. Right. And like just now, you guys mentioned like how do people learn your user research could be from some of the schools, but for people who want to get into the industry and get some working experience, like how might like junior designers or career changers get opportunities to work on user research projects, for example?
So I think if you're a student or if you're working now in the field, there's a few avenues to take. Certainly, if you're already in school, you've got the student capability to get in a co-op program that might be able to direct you into a role that would have research as part of it, or work in a lab at the university where research is happening. If you are working in a design role, like I did, make the intention to just do research and make that part of your career plan, which I did. And it was like an intentional thing where I was like, I want to do more research. And I started pairing up with researchers and learning it, but also a lot of self-knowledge, self-training as well. So I took the foundation of my interaction design and grew on that to become a researcher.
And
yeah.
Sheila, I was just going to add too, I mean, just like anybody trying to sort of break into anything, like all I can say is you got to put the hard work in too. There's books, there's a lot of great books that you can read. There's a growing number of tools that you can learn about and take tutorials in. I just say, be a bit proactive, get out there, explore what's out there, join some social groups and listen to what are the conversations amongst researchers. And, I think just starting to understand a bit more about what the scope of research is about is also really important.
Yeah, and most importantly, join the Radical Research Summit, right? At the end of the month. Okay, I think we're ready to like open questions to the floor. I see many questions. Maybe Daniel and Crystal or Jasmine, do you want to pick out some?
Sure, no problem. I have a better idea. Why don't we pick the questions and then we invite that person, turn on their camera and ask our cool
That would be terrific.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yes.
That's a great idea. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions here. So first up, we have, one second. If I missed somebody, please forgive me. Iram? Yeah, Iram said, I'm gonna leave it to you, my friend. Would you like to ask your questions, Iram? You have questions about portfolio.
Are you still here?
Can you hear?
Okay.
Graham says no.
I can. Let me help him. So he asks, how can I build a UX research portfolio?
I'm just going to say that it's really hard to build a research portfolio. And the reason why is because often when you're doing research, it's confidential. And, we face a similar thing, even, for example, on our website. It's really hard to talk about and show off research work. But I think what you can start to do is to really think about capturing the purpose of the research, the audience, the methods you used, and basically just at least try to demonstrate the scope of projects that you've worked on. So for example, if it's a usability study and there was, I don't know, even if it was 6 people, as we know, that's probably enough for a really basic study. But talk about those things that were kind of the the scope of the research. What was the problem that the research was set out to investigate or explore? And how did the methods that you chose help to deliver the right outcomes? Sheila, I'm going to look to you to add to that.
Like, I'm not fussy about the format. You know, a PDF or a Notion website or whatever. I don't really care. I want to understand the methods that you used and how you've used it. And, you know, certainly if the ultimate outcome of your work is something, you know, you can share that because you've contributed to that. So, you know, you can share that piece. You know, you have to respect the NDA you might be working under, but there's still lots you can share about your work without transgressing or trespassing against the NDAs.
Yeah, or maybe even work for nonprofit groups, right? Where you can actually share the research. Could be one way. Okay, next question.
All right, next up we have Preeti. He is curious about something.
Hey.
Hi, Sheila, Elynn.
Go ahead.
Good to see you guys.
See you too.
I don't. How come I don't see you? Why am I not seeing you? Is your camera on?
I can see her.
Maybe
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just so many
Oh,
screens.
there you are. Hi.
I think my question was more about research reports because I have worked with different types of teams in the past, and more recently, I have been part of like really lean UX teams where you end up like closely collaborating with UX research team or you're doing the research on your own. But when you actually set out to present those reports to stakeholders, I worked on some formats of reports and I felt that there needs to be slightly different approach to these kind of reports. And I wanted to know if you have come up with if you have some tips around that.
Well,
I was going to say the first thing you need to make sure you do is, just like any presentation that you're doing to anybody, is make sure it's compelling. Nobody wants to look at 50 slides of findings.
no.
So I'm going to let Sheila speak more to how we do maybe some of our reporting. But one of the things we always say to our team as well is go back to the original purpose of the research. Always make sure you're going back to that and making sure you've answered the questions that you've actually been asked to answer. Because often the findings can be quite exciting and there might be some great insights and you're so excited to share some of these new things but always make sure you're answering the question that you set out to do first. And then I'm going to let Sheila speak to how we do some of our reports.
I would just adding on that thought though, like challenging yourself by like, if I had to just come up with 3 things out of this whole pile of data and insights I've gathered, you know, thinking, you know, doing some little challenges for yourself like that, then you can really find those compelling, hard-hitting things that are going to impact your client and their customers or their, you know, their users. Sometimes it's interesting to try doing something like that. But we deliver the outputs of our research in a lot of different ways. And sometimes it's really just like a top line summary and it's like, here's all the facts and just, you know, take it away. And that's for our clients that are just like, we just need the info and give it to us. But sometimes they need something that's like very engaging. And we've done something called a design museum. And this was like, you know, artifacts of personas. And we illustrated these personas into these, you know, kind of creatures. And, they, you know, it was very creative output. You know, so most of the time we're really talking about you know, a PowerPoint presentation with some video highlights in it, probably. But
and definitely quotes. Use quotes.
Yeah.
You know, make it. But again, Sheila's talked about kind of these kind of core things. We don't forget to set your research up. So start out with those high level key findings and then go into each one. What was remarkable about each of those key findings? And a lot of it is just guiding your audience through the research in some kind of a digestible way. I would also, you know, we almost always have a one slide or a one-pager summary that can be sent around fairly easily to other stakeholders, and that just gives them enough to say, hey, this was interesting or this was useful, and then they dig in if they want. So we often have a highlights deck as well as a detailed findings deck, and that highlights is something that is often much more shared, and the details is what the actual designers are more interested in digging into that. But as Sheila said, sometimes now we're delivering, like, it could be an ecosystem map that highlights, you know, maybe, well, what you're trying to answer, or that helps paint the picture of a current situation and highlights maybe the pain points that you were trying to get at. So we're fortunate because we actually have a designer on our team, or a couple of designers who are really good at sort of making our work look really good. If you don't have that, again, you can still, it really all comes down to structuring the report in such a way that it's digestible and that it's shareable and usable. And we try to always say that, you know, try to be action oriented. And one thing I've heard Sheila say, which I didn't hear her say now, was sometimes you got to take a stand.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of product people are looking to us. They're not looking to us just for the findings. They're looking for us for the analysis. Does that help, Pretty?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Those are some great tips. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's one question I wanna insert in, because talking to a lot of junior designers or career changes, I think a lot of people are like, oh, should I become a designer or a researcher, or should I be both? Or like, when is it that I should do one or the other? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I would say the career trajectory that we see is people come out of school and they're like, I'm not quite sure yet, and I want to dabble and experience everything. And we support that. And then after a couple of years, people decide what they want to specialize in. And that just seems to be the natural progression. They have an aptitude for one or the other. They're a strength in one area or the other. I mean, we certainly have at least one person I can think of who's very strong at both. But she really actually does prefer research over design. You know, she likes it more, you know, but can you do both? You know, certainly in the early part of your career, but eventually you will probably, a typical career progression will force you to make a choice.
I think it also depends a bit on, I would say, the types of projects you're working on as well. And, you know, for example, if you're working on a lot of service design type work, it encompasses research. So it's difficult to be really good at the design work without having at least some ability to synthesize some research and use that research in your work. So there's definitely some crossover, and yeah, we do encourage all of our team members to, like, if they're researchers, we want them to know a bit about UX design. And actually, the more, we don't necessarily expect them to design things, but they need to understand principles of UX, and they need to be familiar with approaches to UX design. And then on the flip side, you know, designers need to know how they can use research. So they need to know a little bit about it as well.
Yeah, because I noticed, like, smaller tech startups, like, they usually can only afford the first hire, and they almost expect a unicorn, right? Like, you see unicorn job descriptions, and a junior designer doesn't have that, right? So any thoughts about that? Like, how?
Well, I mean, they want a UX team of one, and it does, you know, they exist. You know, we have people on our team who are able to do that. It's just that as you're, I would just say that as you mature in the career, you are likely to gravitate to one or the other.
Okay. Lucas, is that the next question?
Yes, Lucas have some questions about, I think our guest speakers today mentioned briefly about books. So Lucas.
Yeah. I mean, if you're, sorry, go ahead.
No, you can finish.
Go ahead, Lucas.
Okay, so my question is if you guys have any books to recommend, because I think today we have a lot of information on the internet and stuff, but I think books is still a really reliable source of knowledge. And if you guys have some, no, this book are really good, you should read it. It's a must read.
Yes. So if you were going to read one book on UX research, I would recommend Erica Hall, Just Enough Research. It's a terrific book, and it's a very easy, straightforward read. And if you were going to read two books, the second book would be Interviewing Users by Steve Portugal. It's a terrific book about, you know, how to approach structuring in-depth interviews, as well as what to do with this mountain of, like, you know, interview data that you collect and how to make sense of it. I love that book. Elynn, what would you add to that?
Not so much of a book, but one thing that I just encourage every researcher to be serious about is, and I'm not sure there's a book, but there's definitely some online tools and learning, active listening, or what IDEO might call creative listening, listening skills. It is a skill. And if you know, I just think that that's indispensable for researchers, especially because you're doing so many interviews. It's not
Okay, thanks, guys.
Great. Next questions?
Oh, sorry. I was just looking at the books and then paste it on the chat box. Yeah, Matthias, go ahead.
Oh, I thought you had just forgotten me because I was earlier.
I remember, yeah.
I was hoping that. Like, I think my question was already kind of answered. Like, I just wanted to understand a little bit better if you see like any main differences, but on the research part, not just like that there's no budget, but like between the US and Canada, like, is there anything else you would say that makes a big difference between the two UX research industries? And maybe, because I think you already talked about this, then how do you see the UX research sector in like 5 years in Canada? That would be interesting.
Well, I wouldn't say it's so much a difference between Canada and the US as such, but I think some of the differences are more based around the different sizes and different types of company. So in the US, maybe, you know, again, we do some work with the, you know, companies in the Bay Area, and they're all fully into, you know, all the big tech companies are heavily into research. In Canada, I would say that because all of these big companies are setting up operations in Canada and in Vancouver as well, they're bringing that culture with them of incorporating research into what they do. So I think it's more sometimes the smaller organizations that are quite, I'll say, tech products. We see a lot of SaaS companies that aren't quite there in terms of valuing research, and sometimes not even valuing UX, which is sort of baffling at this point. So I think it's more to do with the size of a company often than it is to do with, say, where the borders are. But I think that, you know, I sort of blethered a bit at the beginning about where UX is now and UX research. I mean, I think in 5 years, UX research is going to be a lot like UX design is, where it's quite ubiquitous now. Even in smaller companies, there's a UX designer. I think in future, there's also going to be research, even on smaller product teams as well. So I think that the need and demand for research is going to continue to grow.
Oh, how about the oncoming trend of big data? Like, how does user research like work with that, or
Elynn is excited to be asked.
So for a long time, I've been talking about how UX design and research need to think about bringing data into the work we do as well. And I don't think we're that good at it. I think often as UX designers, we're like, I don't really want to get into the whole world of data. And I think people feel scared of it. They feel that it's all about math. And if they weren't good at math, they sort of have this negative connotation around data. I think that there's a great opportunity to use more data as we think about UX design. And that is really just using data to understand audience behavior. I think, the reality is research is data. We are creating data. We're creating information. If it's a quant survey, it's data. So often we're producers of data, but we are not necessarily as comfortable maybe as we should be in using it. I think where it's going to come into our work more and more is as we use AI and machine learning for our products as core parts of our products. We are going to have to understand a little bit more about the data sets we use and the issues around the quality of the data that we're using for, let's say, our AI training or our machine learning training. And as designers, we're going to have to start asking questions, and researchers, we're going to have to start asking questions about where is the data coming from? Is it clean? How often is it updated? All of these types of things that we should know, because if that is going into what is ultimately creating an experience, we're going to need to be more familiar with that.
So what kind of skills should designers, like researchers, like equip themselves with in the next few years when everything is like digital transformation of sensors in every single corner, right?
Well, I think that there's, I don't have all the answers to this. This is stuff that I've been thinking about for a long time. And in all honesty, we're just starting to take some baby steps in this direction within spatial. I can say that I'm probably the only one in our company that's really enthusiastic about it. Sheila's like, yeah, I know. But I would say that some basic data literacy is a good thing. Learn how Google Analytics work. If there's nothing else that you do, then you should know how to at least look at the data that's coming from your web analytics, assuming you work in web and apps. Often it's very easy to get hold of. If it's a website, maybe not as easy if it's a mobile app, but become familiar with it. You don't necessarily need to become an expert, but you're going to need to think about it from a perspective of, like, if you don't have the money to do a segmentation study, how are you going to start to figure out who your users are? Well, you can use data. You can look at sales data. You can look at analytics data, and you're going to look for patterns in your data. So I would say the very first thing you can do is that Google Analytics. There's online tutorials. There's all sorts of stuff online to at least get you familiar with it, and take the opportunity to actually, look at the data of your website. It's super interesting. I think it's interesting, but where are your users coming into your site? What are they doing from there? And here's a great example of how data can be used in design. I remember working with BC Hydro. I'm not sure I'm supposed to mention their name, but anyway, it was a long time ago. And they wanted to reduce calls to the call center. And they said, we're going to do this big advertising campaign to reduce calls to the call center and get everybody to register for the online billing and My Hydro service. And I said to them, after looking at the data, I said to them, you don't want to do that right now. And they were like, well, of course we do. We want to reduce calls. And I said, well, the data shows that if you drive traffic to certain parts of the website, then what those people do, they go to that part of the website, the very next section or the next page they go to is the contact us. Because they're clearly not getting the information they need that you've taken them to the site. So now they're frustrated because they wanted to do it online, but they can't figure out how. So now they're going to call. I said, if you spend a whole bunch of money sending people to register, then even the registration process is complicated. So you're going to drive calls to the call center. So what they did is they listened to me and they held off on the campaign. They made some changes to the landing pages where they were driving people to look at using this service, and they fixed that before they promoted it. So these are ways that data is used to help drive decisions about design and even marketing a lot.
Great.
So I kind of rambled there, but I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yes.
I was going to add a resource to that, but it slipped my mind. But there's one of the Scandinavian countries it's like AI for all, or I can't remember the name of the course. It's free. It's all about data and AI, and it's kind of like a primer for citizens and artificial intelligence with a lot of information about using data. And I just did a quick Google search and I can't find it, but I will find it.
This is something that I'm quite interested in, and I will put together at some point a reference, like I'll write a blog with some references for data resources that I think would be perhaps of interest. And I'll make sure I share that with Elynn when I get it posted, and then she can share it with you guys.
Yeah, we can share with the community.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so next question.
Yeah, we have another person awaits. It's Devon. Thank you for
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Hi.
Hi, Deb.
Hi. My question is, would a graphic designer have an easier transition as a UX researcher?
Then
Like just getting into, so I have a
Okay.
graphic design experience background. I went to college for graphic design. Would I have an easier experience transitioning into a UX design, UX researcher rather than a typical graphic design agency?
I'm not sure.
Are you in school right now?
No, I finished school.
You finished school. I mean, certainly graphic design and communication design, there's certain like elements of that that are transferable into UX and therefore into UX research. So it's there's a good foundation there. Looking at the methodologies for research that you can apply to your graphic design work, I think that's a great place to start. So,
That's a good idea.
Yeah, thinking about doing user testing on your graphic design work, that can be a way for you to learn how to apply these methods. I mean, there's skill development that needs to happen, but you've got like the foundation of communication design already.
Okay.
So
I guess I'd ask you, sorry, Sheila.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess I'd ask you too, what makes you interested in research?
So I'm learning graphic design, learning the marketing part. I like the marketing, but then the main thing about marketing was understanding what makes people want to like buy stuff or what makes them interact with the product. And that's like kind of like the behind the scenes of what I want to get into.
Okay. And marketing has always been a big user and consumer of research, from market research that has been done, A/B testing, campaigns often, well, I guess I'm thinking more of the data still. But I think market research has good foundations. I think especially if you're designing market stuff, as Sheila suggested, I think even things like A/B testing So understanding what that's about and how you might be able to use that as a graphic designer to say, okay, well, what color palettes are actually achieving the marketing objectives better, or what calls to action, what button colors, what button positioning. You can probably use research to help you hone in and optimize your graphic design work too.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Gloria? Gloria Zhong? I want to ask you a question.
My question was actually it's a bit far back. Okay, found it. I was wondering, how would you approach the problem of research being done and then it's shared to the org, and then like eventually it's kind of lost or not used or forgotten, and you want to keep people engaged and use it in their own work. How would you approach something like that?
Yeah, so I mean, every researcher has suffered this indignity and it will continue to happen. I do think that it used to be a checkbox. It was like, have you done the research? Check. And then like, did anyone ever actually look at it? No, I don't think so. That's changed. And I think it's really about how do you make the research impact in the organization. So it is about like building your influence among your peers or the people who are making decisions. You know, again, going back to like delivering the findings. Are you delivering them in a way that's like resonating with the receiver of the findings or the person who needs to do something with them? Is it actionable? Does it, you know, is it something they can, you know, take away, or is it, you know, is it too, you know, is it confusing? So like, it's about how that research lands and thinking about that. So it's not just about the execution of the research, but thinking about the end audience and what they're going to do with it. So how do you deliver it to them? So you have to think not only about like the end user of your product, but the end user of your research as well. So you really have, you know, two stakeholders in this arrangement. And I think just to add to that, if you really try to understand, so if you're a researcher and you're wanting your research to influence a product, you really want to make sure you understand what your product manager needs and what questions they have, so that you're helping them solve the problems that they have with your research. And also, I think something that we need to think about too is, at what timing is research coming into a product planning cycle? So, you know, sometimes we'll be delivering research, but you always want to sort of make sure you know, like, when's the roadmap planning happening, for example, right? Like if you're hoping that your research is going to help to prioritize what features get built first, then you got to make sure your research is done before all that planning happens, because it's even harder if all that planning's happened and then your research says, well, no, don't build this, but there's already teams assigned and things like that. So think about the timing as well.
Okay, these are great points.
I think the next question is Daniel's.
Oh, yes. I think I've asked a question too. I think my questions is really, I mean, as a junior to mid-level UX designer, I often struggle. How do I convince my boss or any stakeholders that UX research is very important and has the potential to shape the business? Do you guys have any on the ground tips or any advice for any of us here? How do we fight this battle internally?
It's the never-ending battle. Here's my dog. I think what Elynn was talking about earlier about that kind of little win she had, you know, it is part of it. Me wants more dog. Okay, wait until she starts barking. It is really about building that sphere of influence. it doesn't take long for research to prove out its value. It's, it's about getting that first delivery of a project that's delivering, showing the value of the research. You might have to pick something that's maybe obvious, that is going to demonstrate its value. But that's okay. It's kind of a strategic move on your part, to kind of help build that influence that you need to build.
I would say, again, like if your organization doesn't do usability testing, that's a great place to start, where you're building a product, and you can almost even do friends and family, easy, inexpensive research that, really what you're trying to do is evaluate, can someone navigate, for example, or can someone complete a workflow that has been designed. And if you do some simple usability testing, invite them to observe. Always invite your stakeholders to observe, because many of them won't. They won't take the time to do it. But even if they observe one session, in my experience, there's no better way to change people's mind about the value of research is to show it. So, if you start small with a usability test, and they observe it, I mean, I've seen developers get really excited about being part of usability testing as observers, because they're like, oh my God, like we can make this little change so fast, and we can, because everybody wants to make their users happy, right? So starting small, as Sheila was suggesting, and I would, perhaps it is usability that is that small bite, and usability should be pretty well known even amongst developers. So, you'll just, even if you have to like buy them pizza so that they can sit and observe and have a pizza, and it's over lunch or something like that, but a way to engage them just that one time to see that, wow, we can learn a lot from one person, never mind if we, talk to more people. And as soon as you get them buying into that first bite, they'll want more.
Yeah. And with our big clients, I mean, COVID has prevented this from happening, but typically we would go out in the field with them. So, and every day a couple of other stakeholders would come from the business from different parts, so product or development, or, so we'd have like new people riding along with us in the car going to the next appointment. So, those days are kind of over at the moment, but they do observe our virtual sessions.
Oh, following your comments, how do you think COVID has changed research? Are we ever going to go back to normal, or is it going to be mostly remote now?
Well, we are doing in-person research in Vancouver. We're doing a study ongoing most of the year. We've been doing it, and we have another one coming up at the end of the year. Most of our research is remote, but we're doing device testing, and you can't do it remote. So everybody's in PPE from head to toe, and we're quarantining devices, and there's a high like level of
logistics,
safety, and yeah, I mean, we want everyone to be safe, and we've probably run up to 100 people through, or maybe more now, and cross our fingers, nothing has happened yet, no exposures.
But I would say, and maybe Sheila, you'd probably, I imagine you would agree, but even before COVID, we were doing a lot more remote testing. Mostly because, and it often depends on the participants, but especially if you're testing kind of a broad geography for one, or if you're testing, maybe it's, say, business people, it saves time for them in terms of traveling. And it means that, the world where we used to have people coming into the lab, and I mean, there's something great about that, I will say. However, for participants, it's a much bigger effort. And so
I'm just thinking about one of our clients. They really always wanted in person, always, always, always. And it was so unnecessary. And it was a real stumbling block for recruitment. And now we don't have that problem anymore. And
although I will just say that I remember saying to them, we do use remote testing all the time. It goes off without a problem. And the very first participant had tech problems all day long. And it was just like, oh. So, you know, again, if you're going to do remote testing, the lesson is make sure you're really clear on your audience and do a tech check. If they are, let's call them less savvy on the technology front, make sure you talk to them before the planned test. Do a quick check of the technology. It usually takes 5 minutes and it will be way worth your time because you just don't want to waste your valuable research time farting around with people's tech issues, right? So, but I think, you know, remote's here to stay. I think the trend towards it and the reasons for it are quite compelling.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, the pizza trick is good. I'll keep that in mind. Somebody, Hanny, also asked for book suggestions, but I think we have a lot of links being posted down at the chat box already. So I'm gonna skip. I will repost the link for you, Hanny. Also, we have, just give me 1 second here.
Jen would be the next one.
Jen, yeah, Jen Lai, yes. Are you here? If not, I can help you read out the questions and you can see it in the recording. Okay, so he's asking how to judge the quality of research data collected. It's good enough and deep enough.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it all goes back to, first of all, what problem are you trying to investigate? And then how you're going to craft the discussion guide around that. The data that you get out of it is really the quality of it is going to be kind of based upon that platform. A good research plan is really the foundation. Whether you know it's good enough, you know, the patterns start to reveal themselves pretty darn quickly in your research. We see it after 2 or 3 or 4 participants. We start to see patterns in our data. So we know that we have strong, quality data when we see that strong pattern in it.
But as to Sheila's point, I think, how do you know? I think most research reports all research reports should have some information about the methodology that was used, about the participants that were involved. And that is going to tell you something as well. Again, as Sheila said, if it's really clear what the purpose is and the methodology makes sense, and the findings, aren't super crazy or anything, I think it can be pretty good. It comes down to the methodology and I guess the quality of the researchers as well. But to Sheila's point, that test plan is a great anchor, and something that we think is super important. You don't just, you can do quick and dirty testing that doesn't require a formal plan, but if you want your research to be repeatable, if you want it to have some longevity, have a plan, because it's going to give you that thread so that in 6 months' time or a year's time, when someone says, we want to do this study, that you actually can refer to a study that might have been done previously and then think about, whether you're replicating, whether you're,
what do you build on it?
Great. Okay, Tina, your question.
Hi, Elynn and Sheila, nice to meet you. So I have a question. A lot of junior portfolios that I see online, most of them include projects that they just improve the features of an existing product, or say improving the Zara website, for example. So what do you think of these types of projects compared with like product innovation projects, like starting from scratch and come up with a new product idea?
I mean, there's obviously, you know, not every product's in the same place, and, you know, something new and innovative is probably not in the market yet, or very early days to market, in which case your research is a bit different. You're probably still building some foundational knowledge about your audience. Whereas when you've got an established product, it's really about optimizing. Right? So from a research perspective, both are absolutely needed and valuable and valid. What's more, so, I mean, I would say for us, it's often more interesting to be in at the beginning level, but I do think optimizing products is where research really helps you hone and refine. And let's face it, products these days are always going to be iterating and evolving. So that is actually a probably more common scenario for researchers, is to be doing that optimization work. Sheila, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of using that as a strategy for a portfolio, that's the question?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, are both, I think Elynn has answered, like both are important, right? So if possible, it would be great to demonstrate your ability in both areas.
Yes, I don't.
Okay. I answered the question.
I think so.
Thank you.
But again, I mean, if you're truly trying to demonstrate, I sort of missed the portfolio part, so my apologies, but you know, if it's for your portfolio, if you only have one and you don't have the other, a hiring manager is not going to, in a sense, see one as better. Oh, you're missing this piece. I think showing, you know, if you're focused on optimization and you do that well, and you're showing that these features are continuing to improve an experience and deliver business results, then that's really compelling.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Ruchita?
Hi, Ruchita.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I had a question regarding the research roles, and there seems to be a bit of overlap between the design and research roles. So wanted to understand if researchers are expected to know design and design tools, or is it core research that they end up doing as their daily work?
It kind of depends on the organization. I would say we're a smaller agency. We do have some people who do both design and research. Most people are either a designer or a researcher, though. So no, they aren't expected to know each other's kind of skill sets. We just align people to the projects with the skill sets that match, and assign them the tasks that way. It's great that we have a couple of people that are ambidextrous, and they're comfortable across the spectrum. That's but we don't expect that of everyone.
I would just say though that because we do work in a UX, in the field of UX and product design, that it does help in our context for people to at least understand some of the principles. So a researcher should understand some of the good principles of UX. If they're doing usability testing, for example, it helps them to know what what best practices are for certain interface design elements. But again, they can rely on their UX peers a little bit, but in our context, it does help just having a bit of background.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right, we have a few minutes left. We might not be able to go through all the, I think there's 41 more messages. We'll try to get to the end, but oh, maybe we should, shall we announce the promo code?
Oh, Sheila?
Yes, for the Radical Research Conference. Yeah, the two of them have been generous enough to let, because the early bird is already gone, supposedly. But if you're here today and for the IxDA community, you're gonna get the early bird price, you know, with the promo code.
Right.
You
So
wanna-
the promo code is IxDA. You can use it at radicalresearchsummit.com. And it's valid for the early bird price.
Until September 10th.
Okay, great. I did not know that part.
So from today till September 10th. So we've kind of given you about a week to get your IxDA special pricing, which is $49. So to be honest, we've always tried to keep the price of radical research accessible to the broad community. And with this virtual event, it's really allowed us to offer some great price. So
yeah, and there's several talks. There's approximately 3 talks a day. There's a couple of panels. I think Rock is on here. He's chairing one of the panels. And then we have a networking event to close out the summit. So we'll have speed networking. It's the last event of the summit where you will be able to join serendipitously into groups of 4 to meet other people. Our sponsors, some of them are actively, they're sponsoring because they're looking for hires. So, they're not just doing it because they love us. They do love us, but they are doing it because they are looking to hire people and they know that this is a great event to connect with the community.
Okay, excellent. So maybe just last 2 questions.
Sure. Last question. I mean, the second last questions we have is from Riley. Riley, are you here? Do you want to ask your own questions?
I am.
Go on, my friend.
Hi guys, thanks for organizing this as well. I think my question is about whether or not it's really, so 2 questions. So the first question is about entering the UX research field in Canada, because I'm from Singapore, right? So I'm always interested in like going overseas to just kind of explore like the problems out there, because problems in Singapore can be different from problems elsewhere, right? So I think that's my first question, like, is it difficult to enter the research field? And then the second question is more like a generic question, like what are the social problems right now, like across the world? Like what are the big issues that people are discussing nowadays? So yeah, those are my 2 questions. Yeah.
Well, Elynn, do you want to talk about your transition from coming from Singapore?
Well, I used to live in Singapore for 6 years. So yeah, and I moved back to Canada. I think in terms of transitioning and moving to Canada and doing research in Canada, I mean, there's your typical immigration related issues, which some others on this call could probably speak to more than I could. I think that if you've got your university qualifications and you have some experience, I think transitioning to research and getting a job here might be more challenging than if you tried to get some experience in Singapore. And I know that the Singapore government's really committed to service design. And, research is a key foundation to service design work. So in all honesty, if you could get some experience or exposure to working in Singapore in that context, I think then that could be quite appealing to employers here. And, companies like ours will, bigger companies for sure, but even some smaller companies will sponsor people like you who are qualified, that meet certain qualifications for immigration. We'll sponsor you for a work permit. You've just got it's not even, so you've got double the issues, because you've got immigration related issues as well as then career transition issues. But so I'd probably try to separate those and get a little bit of experience first. but yeah.
Maybe a follow-up to that is, do Canadian hirers expect Canadian experience first?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I'm just speaking for us. We would look for, you know, relevant experience in your original market. So no, not for us. I don't think that the big tech companies.
I think they're looking for perhaps that you've got experience with, you know, sometimes a sizable organization or brand that they recognize. That always helps. Sheila's right. We don't, you know, if you had experience from Singapore, we think that's absolutely valid. If someone's got experience from India, that's totally valid as well. Definitely, there are some nuances across countries, but really for what we do, we're trying to explore and answer questions. So we're not too worried about it being like where that experience comes from.
Yeah.
It's more that it's relevant.
Great.
I mean, in terms of like the second part of your question around like what are the social issues, I you know, I think the research community is responding to a lot of the social movements that are you know, part of the world right now. You know, Black Lives Matter and discussions around equity and white supremacy. These are things that we're talking about internally at Spatial, and it's part of the conversation that you'll hear about partially at Radical Research. These are the things that are on researchers' minds, and how to decolonize research and design practices.
Ethics in technology is a big one, and something, again, we're really pretty passionate about, as we've seen, you know, a lot of tech products having harmful impacts to people and to society. And so there's a lot of talk about that kind of stuff too.
I think, you know, partially it's because of the sort of the background that a lot of people come from. It's very diverse. We have different educational backgrounds, and you know, there's a lot of people have you know, social science interests, and you know, there's a diversity in the workforce. So yeah, I feel like researchers are asking important questions at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, we're 1.5 hours already, and there's still tons of questions, but I'll encourage everybody to, you know, join our IxDA Vancouver Facebook group or LinkedIn, and maybe continue the conversation there, and maybe reach out to Elynn and Sheila on their LinkedIn as well. And hopefully we'll see each other at the summit, right? At the Radical Research Summit. All right.
Yeah, we'd love to see you guys join the Radical
Research Summit.
Thank you so much for your time, and thanks everyone for
Elaine,
joining.
for having us and
All
for
right,
organizing
we'll have
this
the
great
video
event.
recording on our YouTube channel later. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Sure.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing is, can I ask everybody just to stay on a bit and turn on your camera? If you like that event, I would like to, you know, have a nice photo for memory.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it. I'm gonna ask Crystal for doing the screenshot, and then I give like 5 seconds for you guys to put on some makeup, and then we can count down 1, 2, 3. All right. So 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Wish you
guys.
guys a good night and great long weekend ahead.
Yes.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. John.
People still on.
Bye, Sarah. Bye, Gloria. Bye, Rock. Bye,
Bye, Rock.
Antonio.
Well, maybe we can exit and